You probably think the most harmful thing is junk food or screen time. Actually, one of the most harmful things that happens to children happens in school. And it is due to the testing regime imposed by the international testing culture. Hang on with me for less than 10 minutes, and I will try to convince you that you can make your children's life happier and much more accomplished. My story begins in 2008. I was then Israel Minister of Education, and in that capacity, I was invited to a Ministers of Education conference in Strasbourg. The topic of the discussion was the impact of the improvements in PISA on economic growth. PISA is an international test taken by 15 years old. It measures the level of knowledge in literacy, science, and math. 600,000 children from 79 countries around the world take the test. Over 3 million children took it since the year 2000 when it was first launched. PISA ranks all the participating countries according to the results. And obviously, everyone wants to be first. This is how education becomes a competition. Once the meeting started, on stage came Dr. Andreas Schleicher, PISA Head of Education and Skill Development. Dr. Schleicher is often called the Global Minister of Education. Dr. Schleicher made a remarkable presentation about the correlation between PISA results and economic growth. Every gain of 25 points out of 600 in the PISA test contributes 1% to the growth of GDP per capita. That certainly is an incredible promise that convinced policymakers to see PISA not only as an educational tool, but as an economic one. When I saw the graph Schleicher presented, I was astonished. I've never seen a graph that claims to represent two variables, test results and growth, which is applicable to all countries around the world, from Mozambique to the United States, for the next 100 years. I wouldn't dare to predict 5 years ahead, would you? I waited patiently until other ministers of education stood in line to get Schleicher's recipe. And then, hesitantly, I approached him and made some critical remarks. Schleicher looked at me dismissingly and said, well, you should learn more about it. I know ministers are supposed to be somewhat dumb and uneducated, but I have my degrees in economics and politics, so I decided to take him on his word. PISA became an obsession. Israel was my starting point. According to PISA, it ranks at the bottom of the achievement list. And yet, despite many structural problems, its economy is resilient and strong, and it's growing faster than the OECD average. If PISA formula doesn't work for Israel, maybe it works for other places around the globe. So I made something very simple. I draw a chart. On the one hand, the states that were at the top of the 2000 PISA list, and on the other, their average GDP per capita growth 15 years later, when the 15 years old who took the test the year 2000 were already a considerable part of the workforce. It turns out Israel is not the exception, but the rule. For example, Japan ranks 4 on PISA, and yet it suffered a long economic stagnation. In terms of growth, it is ranked 147 out of 193 countries. Finland, OECD's favorite country, top of the class, enjoys a medium rate of growth. It's ranked 109 out of 193 countries. Reasons for slow economic growth varies from the aging of the population, low birth rate, global crises, changes of currency rates. None relates to performance in PISA. I then asked myself whether PISA could forecast the economies that are going to grow the fastest. According to Focus Economics, the fastest growing economies in the next 5 years will be India, Bangladesh, Rwanda, Vietnam, and Cambodia. None participated in PISA 2000. India participated in PISA 2009 and came 72 out of 73 countries, one before the last. In fact, the map of the fastest growing economies correlates better with the map of high levels of illiteracy than with that of high PISA scores. Look at the data and think for yourself. This does not mean education and economic growth are not related. Improvements in education support growth, but there are significant differences between developing and developed countries. Developed economies reach an educational plateau. Hence, education influences less economic growth. Developing economies are more dependent on improvements in education. Yet PISA ignores this finding and makes a set of promises that are misleading, but makes PISA extremely popular among policymakers. For example, bringing all countries up to the level of Finland, OECD best performing country, will result in gains in the order of $200 trillion. Or the addition to the GDP from improving American score to the Canadian score would, by historical pattern, be enough to resolve the US debt crisis. In the 21st century, no economic graph would look like the one presented by PISA. Since 2008, we've seen one crisis after the other. None of them had something to do with education. Look at this graph again and tell me, does anyone here believe that the next 80 years would look anything like this graph, even if all countries around the world will get 25 points on PISA? I guess not. So why are we subjugating our children to a test regime that causes so much cognitive, emotional, social, and moral harm? Why do we agree to put pressure on 15 years old in ways that erode their ability to enjoy schooling? Why, instead of nurturing 21st century skills alongside social and emotional skills, so necessary in the corona era, we give in to PISA? Why do we commercialize our children and market them as human capital rather than as individuals? We shouldn't wake up. Don't be shocked by the next PISA results and change your education system accordingly. Offer other ways of evaluating education and growth. And yet, there is one thing we should learn from all these years of testings. There is only one correlation which is constant, linear, and universal. And it is between PISA results and economic status. Poor children who experience social and economic distress perform less well in PISA as in all other tests. If we truly want to improve our children's life, we should fight poverty, provide children with protection and support, food, and proper health services. My conclusions are therefore clear. First, stop the testing regime, find other ways of evaluating human skill. Second, fight poverty. This can really change the life of millions and millions of children. And when you think about prosperity and growth, rather than measuring the average, measure inclusiveness. In other words, don't be tempted to raise the average by investing in strong students who can easily improve their scores. Invest in poor children and allow them to flourish. And finally, set our children free of the PISA regime and give them the gift of learning. Thank you.